Sit down and grab your lunch. It's time for the Bolts Brown Bag, the only show where you make the call.
The bye week is over, and Raiders Week Part 2 is here. Welcome to another edition of Bolts Brown Bag, live from our Ken News Cafe patio. We are here to talk Chargers football every Monday at 12:30, and I'm very pleased to welcome back to the guest co-host chair, Craig Elsten at 619 Sports from Mighty 1090 Radio and Soccer's play-by-play, and just kind of general fun guy to have here on the desk. So good to see you again.
I appreciate the sentiment. Glad to be fun.
It's good to be back. Not obviously the Chargers didn't play yesterday, so we don't have a game to dissect this week.
Nor a loss. No loss to dissect.
That's true. So it makes this show a little bit different, but we're going to look back at the first 9 games of the season, where the Chargers stand right now, and look ahead at what this team is going to have to do over the last 7 games, because I really think they've put themselves not in an impossible spot, but once again in an uphill climb the rest of the season if they hope to get back to the playoffs.
Well, Ben, the last time you had me on was coming off of a Raiders game where at that point I think we said on the air they had done exactly what they had to do. They were at 5-1 through the weakest portion of their schedule, knowing it was going to get nothing but harder the rest of the way. We talked about that challenge a few weeks ago, and the other phrase we talked about was roster erosion. Because through the first 6 games, through those 5 wins, every game seemed to chip a player, a key player, off of the 53-man roster. And now, to me, this is just the Crows coming home to roost, what's happened the last 3 weeks.
Right, and the question that we still don't have answered is how many of these players are they going to get back now that they've gotten that rest, that bye week, the 1 game in 23 days that everyone kind of pointed at, and certainly you hope that injured players come back, and guys who weren't injured but maybe were playing at less than 100% are more energetic or are healthier when they come back. But there's no guarantee about injuries in the NFL. Just because you have time off doesn't mean it's just a magical cure for all things that ail the Chargers. So we got to look at what the Chargers need to do regardless of injury moving forward. And we got a poll question up at our Bolts Brown Bag page. If you're watching us now, it should be right there on the right side of your screen. How many games do you think the Chargers are going to end up winning? They're 5-4 right now, 7 games left. So the choices are, for the optimists out there, 11 or 12. So that means undefeated, 7-0 or 6-1. 10 is an option. 9 is an option. 8 is an option. And then I made 7 or less, kind of the catch-all for it's not going to go well the rest of the way. So you can vote. We'll update the poll so far. Right now, 8 wins, though. Is leading at 39% of the votes so far on the poll. That's obviously not going to be good enough to make the playoffs. I'm not sure 9 wins is going to be good enough to make the playoffs in the AFC right now, and that's the challenge facing the Chargers moving forward.
And my vote would be 9 on that list. And frankly, Ben, and you're the guy who I know digs the tiebreakers, figures out all the scenarios. You're Mr. Scenario. And as you very well know, because of that, the scenarios don't play well for the Chargers right now. They have already booked a number of very important losses that put them behind the 8 ball. And really, you have to look at Kansas City now and say, Kansas City's out in front of you. Are you going to get 2 wild cards out of the AFC West? Very difficult setup now. Whereas the last time I was on, the Chargers had kind of done their job, kept their garden tidy. Now there's rabbits running through the garden. They're in trouble.
Well, when you look at what the Chargers have not done well the last few weeks, we talked about it a little bit last week as well. You start at the offensive line. When Phillip Rivers was playing at an MVP level and the Chargers were winning 5 games in a row, the offensive line wasn't great, but it was good enough to give Phillip Rivers time to do what he needed to do. Short passes, get the ball out. It was good enough to open up some holes for Brandon Oliver. He had those back-to-back 100-yard rushing games. It just hasn't been good enough these last 3 games. The pressure has been much higher on Rivers. The holes have been non-existent for Oliver. Might help to get Ryan Matthews back, and it does look optimistic that he'll return, but that doesn't fix the offensive line, and they're not getting anyone back on that offensive line when they come back from the bye against the Raiders.
Well, and, not to beat the old drum over and over again, but Nick Hardwick. Nick Hardwick is not here. Nick Hardwick was the most important player, other than Phillip Rivers, the most irreplaceable player on the Chargers roster this season. I know you worked with John Gennaro on that Bolts from the Blue podcast, and we talked about that. Who are the 3 most irreplaceable players? And really, you could make the argument that the Chargers lost all 3 beyond Phillip Rivers in terms of Danny Woodhead and Ryan Matthews behind Nick Hardwick. Rich Ornberger had a good first game starting for Nick. Since then, it's really been downhill. And because of that, pressure up the middle creates everything. The other guy I think you have to talk about is DJ Fluker, who has had, I'd say, a little bit of a sophomore slump this year.
I'm hoping that there's some injury issues there. I know he's had an ankle problem, maybe a little less than 100%, but I think you also look at the absence of Jeremy Clary next to him, fostering him through that rookie season, I think helped him a lot, and he hasn't had that. He's had young players, rookies often standing right next to him. He's only a second-year player still. He's not a savvy vet yet, and it's probably hurting to have not that experience next to him.
Well, and really, when you look at what makes this Chargers offense tick, it's getting those manageable gains and getting to a third and reasonable, getting to a 3rd and 3 to 6. And the Chargers are very good at converting those situations. And because of all of this line attrition, because of no Ryan Matthews, who at least is able to kind of lean forward and get you 1 or 2 in spots where maybe he would have gotten you 0 or -1, now you're seeing Rivers in 3rd and 8, 3rd and 9, 3rd and 10, and you're seeing the result. To me, some of this stuff is almost inevitable.
All right, this is Bolts Brown Bag, so we can't get started without finding out what's for lunch. I know you were a big fan, of this guy last time and really enjoyed your meal.
Honestly, my favorite part
so
of the show.
We're bringing in our sous chef, Brandon Chambers, who's back to tell us what we're eating today and to talk a little bit of football. But Brandon, good to see you again. What do we have here? Let's find out what's on the menu.
Today we have the chicken cordon bleu with some wild rice, broccoli, and Brussels sprouts. And on top of the cordon bleu, we drizzled some hollandaise sauce with a little wine vinaigrette into it with some lemon juice in it as well to add a little taste to it.
Always good to bring a little acidity into the dish. That's a little chef secret right there. And you're always good with the vegetables. At least you make it look healthy, which is appreciated. So this is Raiders week again.
Yes,
Chargers going to face the Raiders. And let's start looking ahead. We're going to have Scott Bair, by the way, from CSN Bay Area, join us in just a few minutes to talk a little bit more about the team. But this is dangerous. I mean, an 0-9 team coming in that came closest to a victory this season when they faced the Chargers 1 month ago. They don't want to go 0-16, and they've got a really tough schedule. They got to be looking and saying, hey, if it's going to happen, maybe we can do it this week against the Chargers.
And I think that's what they're planning on doing. They have their backs against the wall just to get one win. So coming in the Raider week, it's rivalry week, so it's going to put a lot of emotions into it, and it's going to be a lot of rowdiness, a lot of hard-hitting football. So it's going to be a lot of competing this weekend coming up.
All right, what have you been up to this last week? You guys have a game?
No, we're on a bye week this week.
So you're following along with the Chargers.
Yes, I am.
Nice.
We have a playoff game this weekend, though, so up at Lincoln High School, 7 o'clock p.m.
All right, so tell me, since the Chargers are coming off a bye, as a football player, and if you haven't joined us before, Brandon's a wide receiver for a local team, developmental, semi-pro team. Do you find that it's easy? Do you get healthy if you're energetic out of the bye, or is there that rust factor? Got to get back into a game. It's been a couple of weeks since we've played.
To me, I think it's more of as we get rested. When you get a bye week, there's less hitting. It's more film watching to see where you can produce more on that field where you made the mistake, so you don't make that mistake twice. And mostly you're getting those players back healthy because they're not hitting, so they're mostly resting up, icing the injuries. And the injuries that the Chargers have is not an injury that you can just lick your wound and then get back in. It takes like 3 to 4 weeks. These are sprained ankles, pulled hamstrings, like injuries that take a while that you can't really freak accidents, I call them. So I think the bye week really is going to help.
All right, keep that warm for Craig.
Yeah,
I definitely will.
He's
2 of those
already.
right in there.
So as soon
1 p.m.
as soon as we're done, he's going to have his lunch.
All right.
Everyone else, and we get a good crowd out here. I don't know, you got behind us, but good crowd eating their lunch. So I know you got to get back to work. Chef Charles waiting for you.
All right.
Good to see you as always, Brandon.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
All right, Craig. As Brandon mentioned, the Chargers are coming off a bye. They can't afford any rustiness as they come back here. I mean, they've got to come back because I don't see a realistic scenario where the Chargers lose this week and can save the season. I know they'd only be 5-5, and they tell us, it's not done yet. We can come back. We can still win 11. We can still win 10. With the schedule they have remaining, I don't see how it's possible for the Chargers to realistically make the playoffs if they don't win this week and probably the following week against the Rams.
All right, well, first things first, let's address the issue of rust, okay? You're coming off the worst game in like 3 decades. So you can't get rusty off that. I mean, what are you rusting? The jalape's already in the shed. What is gathering rust? So I think the Chargers can only play better based on how horribly they played prior to the bye. Also, we saw the roster at its weakest point in Miami, and I think we will see a stronger roster coming forward, and in particular, just getting Ryan Matthews back. Having the ability to turn this offense back into a two-pronged attack because, frankly, and we talked about it the last time I was here, Brandon Oliver had a couple of great games, and I remember saying those might be his two best games ever. And they still might be.
Yeah, they might.
So Matthews is a guy that at least has proven he can move the pile. I watched the entire Raider game yesterday, the Raider-Bronco game, and Oakland came out hard against one of the best teams in the country, one of the best teams in the NFL, and they got absolutely shellacked. This team is empty defensively, and as long as Phillip Rivers can be protected to some extent this weekend, he's going to carve these guys up.
Speaking of empty defensively, Eric Stengel tweeted in, at this point I'm just hoping the Chargers play better coming off their bye week than the Bears did. now they're as empty defensively right now, so boy, that was a hideous performance.
That was
last
a team
night.
is gone performance.
Yeah,
that's you got to move on.
I mean,
now.
if you're a Charger fan, you're hoping that the Raiders are at that level now, that they have simply lost all hope and show up, and if you can score a quick touchdown on Sunday, you kick them back to Oakland at 0-10, and that would be 16 losses in a row for the Raiders, by the way, dating back to last season. So that would be an entire season's worth of losses without a win for the Raiders. That's what's on the line this Sunday.
I got to be honest, I can't imagine a scenario where that doesn't happen. I really can't, Ben. The Chargers have to beat the Raiders. The Chargers are going to beat the Raiders. Oakland just doesn't have enough right now. You don't have a running attack that you're scared of. Your passing attack, hey, look, Derek Carr played great against the Chargers last time out. And if he is in a clean pocket like he was in Oakland, maybe he plays well again, but they just don't have the targets, the playmakers. To me, even if Oakland gets a little bit done, the Chargers should be able to get a little bit more done.
All right, before they went on the bye, some of the Chargers talked about what they're going to be facing when they come back. They're back today, so we've got Phillip Rivers and Antonio Gates, and the word character comes into play quite a bit in what they were talking about here.
We're going to find out what we're made of. We've been in these situations over the last 8 years plenty of times, and we've always fought with the character and the toughness and the desire and heart that we thought we had.
There's no need for us to be down on one another. Those are things that happen in this league. Adversity sets in every single season. So it hit us, and how we respond to it is going to say a lot about our character.
If there's something you want to be encouraged about as a Chargers fan at 5-4, it is the fact that this is something that they face not only just last year, but really every single year of the Phillip Rivers era, of the North Turner era, even when Marty was there. Every single year the Chargers have this gut check, middle of the season, we're in trouble, we better start winning, and almost invariably they do. They don't always come back and make the playoffs, but they almost always go on a nice run where they start playing better and get it fixed in November into December.
And we've seen that. Now here's the problem. How many times have they dealt with the schedule that this year's Chargers team has to deal with down the stretch? Those closing 5 games, I still feel like if you get 2 of those games, you've done yourself pretty well. And what that means is you absolutely have to beat Oakland and St. Louis just to get to 9 wins under the scenario that I described. That's not going to be easy either.
Yeah, I mean, it is one of the toughest remaining schedules in all of football right now. So, I mean, you get through these next 2 games, and St. Louis I don't think is going to be a pushover either. I mean, the Rams have been playing a lot better lately. And
then
after
the Niners.
And then after that, it's brutal. So you win the next 2, and then you still have to take probably 3 out of the last 5 against that brutal schedule to get to the necessary 10 wins.
Right.
All right, let's go out right now and talk a little about those Oakland Raiders and look ahead to this week. Joined from CSN Bay Area by Scott Bair, a good friend of ours, used to be down here covering sports. Scott, it is good to have you on. Welcome to Bolts Brown Bag with Ben and Craig. How you doing, Scott?
I am excited to be on. Nice to talk to you guys. It's been a while.
So, first of all, how miserable is it to cover the Raiders on a weekly basis?
It's pretty rough, and it's not even just weekly anymore because we're coming up on the anniversary of my last winning game story. They last won a game November 17th, 2013, and they will play the Chargers on the 364th day since I wrote something positive on a Sunday. It's been a long, arduous journey.
Scott, I watched a whole lot of that Denver game yesterday, and I really thought the Raiders came out and played almost as well as they could early in that game. Really gave Denver a battle, picked off Peyton Manning a couple of times, and then, boy, they just locked in offensively, and the Raiders could not stop Peyton from that point really forward until they put Brock Osweiler into the game. What do you see right now from this Raiders team defensively? What's breaking down week by week?
I think what it is I put a lot of blame on this offense for having a real inability to stay on the field for longer than 3 plays. They lead the NFL in 3 and outs. Guys, yesterday they had 10 of them. 10 in one game. They averaged a 3 and out on 1 out of every 3 drives, and that defense is going to wear down because they've been playing better. I thought they had a really good game plan against Peyton Manning, because they were rushing him through the A gaps. They were creating a lot of problems for Peyton. They were tipping balls at the line of scrimmage. But Peyton adjusted, and I think that you really saw which was a backbreaker, a 51-yard screen pass with 3 missed tackles. That came right after a Derek Carr interception. And I think the offense just kind of wore that defense down, and mentally they were beaten before they ever took the field on that drive, which was the first of five consecutive touchdowns.
You know, I mentioned earlier how tough the Chargers' remaining schedule is, Greg. One of the teams that might have a tougher schedule coming in is the Raiders, though. How worried are they, or how serious of a possibility is now 0-16 just this season? You mentioned it's 0-15 in the last 15, but could they join the Lions and the Tampa Bay Bucks as teams to go winless in an entire season?
It's very realistic because too many times they've been competitive in games, and while you think that might be one point that would suggest that, hey, they're not going 0-16, but they've missed their opportunities already, and they have just one team left on their schedule with a losing record, and that's the St. Louis Rams, who beat the Seahawks, who beat the 49ers and play a lot of teams tough. Other than that, it's a lot of tough road games. It's a lot of high-powered offenses, and what we saw from this Raiders team last year that I think will translate is last year that defense, which was thin, got tired, started giving up points in huge bunches, and really wore down towards the end of the regular season. So, yeah, 0-16 is a very real possibility. And if we're going to have some fun with this, maybe they have to go 0-16 just to get that number 1 draft pick, because Jacksonville and Tampa Bay, those teams aren't going away, gentlemen. They're going to fight to the bitter end.
They've got their losing hat on, and they're going to keep trying as hard as they can. Now, I have to ask you, Scott, about your quarterback, Derek Carr, because I'm guessing in the Carr family household, there are some sleepless nights for mom and dad because they know very well what happened to David Carr in his rookie season in Houston. He got beat up, beat down mentally, and I really think his career was squashed before it ever had a chance to flourish. Now, I don't think Derek Carr's getting pounded into the turf literally as much as his big brother was, but what is your take on his career arc development so far? Is this rookie season, you think, propelling him forward, or is the lack of success a real concern?
You know, up until this game, I really thought that he was making strides each and every week, and he seemed to go backwards against the Broncos. I'm still taking a bigger picture look at this, and I think that really Derek Carr is David 2.0. He's a better version because he learned from what he saw his older brother go through, meaning David Carr had 76 sacks in his rookie season, and there's no mistake that Derek has a quick release, gets the ball out fast, and is not willing to take those big hits, to throw the ball away. And so I think that a lot of the mistakes of older brother do not translate to younger brother. And he does have a good, strong mentality and a real ability to kind of leave his work at home, still be happy outside of it. But there is a real concern, I think, how much this losing can wear on people, because we've seen time and time again, losing guys who come in and play early for bad teams wears on and drains the talent right out of quality quarterbacks. I think that is the big fear moving forward. And I would not make a switch to Matt Schaub. I wouldn't do that. Stick with this guy. Go with him. But there is concern if they go 0-16, how much can this guy take? Because this team can't run at all. So all the pressure's on number 4 to turn out offense. Will that pressure break him? I don't think so. But if this keeps going, that glass is getting thinner and showing more and more cracks.
Last thing, Scott, and then we'll let you go. Bring it back to the Chargers game this week. The Raiders may have played their best game of the season a month ago when they had the Chargers. I mean, they had them, and they let them off the hook up in Oakland. Are they looking at this game and saying, well, we almost did it before. Maybe this is our best chance to get that win? Is that what they're going to be looking at this week?
There's definitely some confidence because, generally speaking, over the last couple of seasons, the Oakland Raiders may not beat the Chargers, but they always play them tough, especially in San Diego, where they think that they're going to have enough fans to at least make some noise and generate some intensity from it. That's just how they think about it. Whether that's true or not, that's how Oakland goes about it. And I don't think that they're looking at the Chargers as low-hanging fruit. I think that they know what Phillip Rivers can do. They know what this offense is capable of. And the fact of the matter is the Raiders are already thin at cornerback. I don't know if they have enough healthy bodies to cover all of the Chargers' weapons. So I think that is a concern, and I really think it's going to be interesting to see how they respond after their first true Heine whooping under interim head coach Tony Soprano. They've been competitive until Sunday. I think it will be interesting to see how they respond. He gave them an extra day off Monday, day off Tuesday to try to get them fresh and mentally ready to go against a very difficult Chargers offense. Can this defense hold up enough? Can they get enough takeaways to stay in the game over the course of 4 quarters? That's what we haven't seen yet, and that's what they absolutely need against San Diego. 2
desperate teams, maybe for different reasons, but could make for an intriguing game on Sunday. Scott, I really appreciate you joining us on Bolts Brown Bag. Thanks for your time.
Thanks, gentlemen. Appreciate it.
Talk to you later, Scott.
Awesome. Good stuff from Scott there. And by the way, I did see yesterday on Twitter, and you call me the master of the tiebreakers. So technically at 0-9, the Raiders could still win the AFC West in a 4-way tie at 7-9 if the Broncos lose the rest of their games and the Chiefs and Chargers also finish at 7-9. So Raiders fans, don't give up hope. It's still there.
So you're saying there's a chance?
Yes. And we are also selling Powerball tickets to Raiders fans as well if you feel like your chances are that good.
And the Coronado Bridge, I have some shares.
Before we get to our 3-question segment, I want to do a little quick review of the first half, and
sure.
I want to give out our Bolts Brown Bagger of the first half award. We give every week our Bolts Brown Bagger of the game. I thought I'd just take the first 9 games before the bye and give it to the guy who thought I thought deserved it the most. So, without further ado, I think it's got to be Corey Legit. He's not putting up gigantic stats, sack numbers, tackle numbers, but if you watch Corey Legit's energy on the field, every single play, he's the kind of defensive lineman who will run down a screen pass 12 yards down the field to keep it from being a 20-yard gain and stop it at 12. He has got the highest motor, as scouts like to say, on the field for the San Diego Chargers, and if they just had more players like Corey Legit on defense, I think the Chargers would be a much better defensive team.
Well, I agree with that sentiment, Ben, for sure, and especially the motor part of it. And, he's a guy who's giving you that max effort. That's one defensive high pick that has really worked out for the Chargers, and I feel like injuries are the reasons why a couple of the other picks we haven't been able to evaluate properly in terms of Ingram, and maybe you could even say Verrett.
I'm surprised that there haven't been more pleasant surprises. I mean, the Chargers are 5-4. Which is, I kind of thought 6-3 at this point. But if you look up and down the roster, I mean, who has really come out and said, wow, he's having a great season? Brandon Oliver has been kind of a pleasant surprise, but only because of massive injuries. Everyone else, you say, yeah, Legion's good, but we expect him to be good. Phillip Rivers is good, but we expected him to be good. Gates is having a great season.
That would be my guy.
I mean, he is a future Hall of Famer.
Yeah.
So, the numbers are there. Disappointments, though, I mean, you can just start listing them. Donald Butler, Kendall Reyes has been a disappointment. Donald Brown has been a disappointment. And that doesn't even include all the injuries, taking guys off the field like Ryan Matthews and Danny Woodhead and Nick Hardwick. Huge disappointment. So maybe 5-4 is actually not so bad when you consider what's gone on in the first half.
Well, we kind of talked about it. It's honestly kind of where they should have been.
Yeah.
They did a great job in the first 6 weeks, and then the roster got them.
All right, let's talk about the rest of the NFL. Joining us, our web editor, Ferris Tanyos, is here with another edition of our 3 questions. Good to see you, Ferris.
Yeah.
What do we got this week?
So, first question. the Ray Rice and Adrian Peterson, both cases had a lot of developments last week. They both could be reinstated within a couple weeks. Should they be reinstated? Should they play this season? And do you think they will play this season?
You know, I think Ray Rice is going to win his appeal from everything I'm hearing, but I don't see a team going out and signing him.
No.
So I think it ends up being moot for Ray Rice. As for Adrian Peterson, the way I've kind of understood it is that he hasn't been punished yet by the league. The paid leave that he's been on doesn't count as a suspension. So Roger Goodell still going to hand out a penalty, and it seems like, 6-7 games with the rest of the season for the Vikings would be kind of appropriate just to get it all in the past, have an off season to try to do some PR damage repair when he comes back, if he's going to come back, and then start new the following year. So I don't think we're going to see either of them again.
What's fair and what's right and what's going to happen could be three completely different things. Okay? What's fair may be for Adrian Peterson to be reinstated because they've come to a plea agreement, the criminal matter is over, and he's been on, you could say time served. You could easily say that, time served retroactively for that time on the suspended list. But Roger Goodell went through a worldwide PR bleep storm for under-suspending Ray Rice. And the league was dragged through not just the sports world's version of the mud, but also all the news channels went after. I mean, worldwide, the NFL brand took a giant hit. So I will say there is 0.0% chance that Adrian Peterson appears on the field again this year, and that Ray Rice appears on the field anytime, even next year.
You leave a little wiggle room there? Like 0.01?
No, zero chance.
Let me ask you this, though. So Goodell testified under oath. No one's seen the testimony. We don't know what he said.
Sure.
He could have very well said, yeah, I knew it was on the tape, but I lied. Do you think that's going to come out? And if it does come out, do you think anything changes for Ray Rice?
Where Ray Rice is from a PR standpoint, I mean, he is in the bottom of the well.
It doesn't have anything to do with Roger Goodell, what Ray Rice's problem.
Right. Yeah.
Roger Goodell is his own problem. That's
Yes.
a whole different issue. And,
Agreed.
And that could come back and hurt Roger Goodell, but I don't think it really affects Ray Rice at this point.
Ray Rice cold-cocked a lady on worldwide television about 25 million times because it was replayed 25 million times. That's not
Sad,
going
but
away.
true.
No.
Question number 2.
Okay, so after starting 2-0, Chicago's last 5 of their last 6, they got absolutely blown out last night by the Packers. They're the first team since, this is my favorite stat, I think, ever, since the Rochester Jeffersons in 1923 to allow back-to-back 50
The
games.
Jeffersons, George and Wheezy?
Yeah.
Point totals moving on up.
So your Bears GM, Phil Emery, do you trade Jay Cutler or do you fire Mark Trestman?
I'm getting rid of Cutler. I'm getting rid of Cutler immediately because here's why. Remember when Brandon Marshall called out Jay Cutler?
Yeah.
That was before these 250 burgers. Okay? So their team locker room came to an inflection point. They lost that game 3 games back, and Brandon Marshall called out Jay Cutler in the locker room. They went at it in the locker room. Then the press came in. Marshall outed him to the press. And right there you knew that was the moment. Do the Bears come together or do the Bears fall apart? They fell apart. So this is it. No matter how much talent, quote-unquote talent, is out there, Cutler cannot coexist with this offensive skill group going forward. You've got to get rid of Jay Cutler.
I actually like some of the things Mark Trestman did last season on offense. Innovative. I was excited for the Bears to have him. But when you look, I mean, they had Lovie Smith. And whatever you think about Lovie Smith, he took the Bears to a Super Bowl. He went 10-6 and got fired. And then you bring in this guy, and the Bears' defense completely falls apart. They missed the playoffs last year, and now they look like they're going to end up as one of the worst teams in the league this year. I don't know, you get a third season after that. I mean, you took a respectable franchise and flushed it down the toilet in your chance as head coach. Whether it's your fault or not, I mean, you can throw as much blame as you want on Jay Cutler. Most coaches don't survive that.
All right, now let me throw a couple counters in there.
But didn't Cutler have a lot of issues in Denver?
Absolutely.
I mean, doesn't he maybe have a personality disorder?
You weren't here for the Phillip Rivers Jay Cutler war that went on, but believe me, and people thought that Jay Cutler was in the right. I mean, people actually thought that Jay Cutler was the good guy and Phil Rivers was the jerk about 6 years ago when he was with the Broncos. Now everyone, hopefully, in the NFL world knows that the absolute opposite is true, but it was a Monday Night Football game, and we don't need to rehash it now.
Just a couple quick things. The Bears' defense is terrible because the Bears' defense is terrible, not because of Lovie Smith or Mark Trestman. Lovie Smith is in Tampa. Tampa is terrible. They can't stop anybody either. So I don't put anything on that part of it. I don't think Lovie Smith leaving killed the Bears. If I'm going to pick who I think is going to have a better next 5 years in the NFL, Mark Trestman, Jay Cutler, I'm taking Trestman. 100%. Cutler has shown the world what he is year after year after year after year. You return to that, you get what you get.
My question 2A, by the way, just to throw in, if the Green Bay Packers had left Aaron Rodgers in the second half and just said, you know what, this is a division rival, let's just stomp them. I mean, how many touchdown passes could he have thrown?
11.
And should they have done that? Should they have done that? Could he have gotten to 10? Could he have gotten to double digits?
The answer is 11 and no.
That would have been so fun, though. I mean, doesn't he deserve?
I don't want to take a shot at Peyton Manning, but I think if it was Peyton, he would have stayed.
Doesn't he deserve
He
the
would have
record
stayed, right?
for most touchdown passes in a game, though? I mean, now he doesn't even have the team record. He still shares it with Matt Flynn. Of all people. You had to get him 7 so you can at least take Matt Flynn's record a week.
You didn't have to. You really didn't have to.
All right, question 3.
So, pretty mediocre NFL day, I think we can all agree.
Yeah.
The 2 best games, probably, you had 49ers Saints, Dolphins Lions. Probably the best play, I think, all season. Kaepernick, 4th and 10. They're down 24-21.
Yes.
A minute 30 left. Kaepernick scrambles around and launches this 50-yard bomb to Crabtree. Sets up they tie the game with a field goal, and then they win it in overtime. And then you had the Lions down 16-13. Stafford drives the field and makes this incredible sidearm throw to Theo Riddick. They also win. If you were, you're a GM, which QB would you rather have long-term, Kaepernick or Stafford?
That's a good question. I like that question. Kaepernick.
Really?
Yeah, I'm going to take Kaepernick. Stafford, Calvin Johnson was back. He had a good game. Calvin Johnson not there, doesn't do much. He's a little bit too erratic. To me, he's the guy fantasy I want. Separate that. Fantasy, I want Stafford. Real life, I want Colin Kaepernick.
All right, let me say this. If I've got a good roster around a quarterback, I want Matt Stafford because I know what I'm getting. I'm getting a solid, not spectacular quarterback, good arm. He's gonna get me to the playoffs with a good roster around him. If I don't know what I've got, I may take the flyer on Colin Kaepernick because I think you've got a much wider range of success, failure, injury possibilities for Kaepernick, I think, are high. You can just roll the dice with Colin Kaepernick. Maybe he'll put you on his back and take you to the playoffs. But if you got a good roster, I might go the safe route. I think safer choice is Matt Stafford.
As a Bengals fan who had to watch that Cleveland debacle on Thursday and has to know the Bengals took Andy Dalton 1 pick before Kaepernick.
That is true.
I have to go with Kaepernick too. I think he's one of those wild. He's kind of like the Russell Wilson, right? He's a wild card quarterback. His stats aren't very good, but he can win you games down the stretch.
Well, and that play you brought up, recency bias. I watched that whole game. It was a really good game, but that's an Elway play.
Yeah.
What he did in that play was you're not supposed to be able to A, keep the play alive that long. B, get to the right corner of the field, and then, whoop, and 48 yards in the air.
When he launched that thing, there were 3 guys coming at him, and he wasn't even set.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know how he threw that ball 55 yards. I mean, that was crazy.
So I'll take that play.
But they can't make it rhyme like, hey, diddle, diddle, ray, race up the middle. 4th and 29. Crabtree, Kaepernick, very hard to rhyme. I just tell you that. Very hard to rhyme.
True.
Ferris, thank you very much.
Thank you.
For the 3 questions. By the way, on that game, I just wanted to bring up the Hail Mary to Jimmy Graham on the last play of regulation. I cannot believe that Jimmy Graham says, I didn't commit offensive pass interference. He says he shouldn't have been called. Okay, I will acknowledge that sometimes that doesn't get called, but that doesn't mean that it's not a penalty and it shouldn't be called. I thought it was a great call by the officials. Pushed off, clearly, helped him catch that pass, and it should not have counted. New Orleans definitely shouldn't have won the game on that play.
Now, I'm not disagreeing with you. I agree it should have been called, but the reason it should have been called, it was number 20, Davis. Sorry, Mr. Niners guy. I don't know your name. But that defender, I'm a Sockers guy. He made the perfect soccer play. He sold the foul. If he doesn't go like this, wah! As he's falling, he was already off of Graham when he threw his arms out theatrically. If he doesn't throw his arms out, they don't throw the flag, period. He sold that. If you watch it all the way through, they're holding each other off. At the very end, there's a little touch. I think he catches the ball regardless of the contact. But Davis, if he just goes down like that, no call. But he goes, whee, and a call.
The trainers running out with the magic spray helped sell it, too.
And they took him off on a stretcher. And it was all good.
All right, Chargers and Raiders next Sunday. The Chargers absolutely have to win. We got the standings right now. Just quickly before we go, I want to throw those up. We've got the AFC West standings and the current wild card standings. I mean, the Chargers are still just 2 games out of first place, and they still have games against all their divisional opponents. They'd have to sweep them all. But if they did beat the Raiders, Broncos, and Chiefs on the way in, they could get back to pretty good shape, not only in the wild card but also in the division. They'd have to sweep all of those games. The wild card, as you mentioned earlier, the tiebreakers aren't necessarily favorable. You see the Chargers are ahead of the Dolphins right now, even though they lost to the Dolphins. That's because the Bills have the first tiebreaker over the Dolphins on head-to-head. But if that all of a sudden didn't become a tie, the Dolphins could vault the Chargers. If the Chargers, they have games against the Ravens and the Chiefs. If you want to get a wild card, you're going to probably have to win both of those games in addition to at least 2 more and probably get to 3. So you look at that schedule again, it's a tough road to hoe. Got to get wins in these home games the next 2 weeks because very tough those final 5 games.
If you don't win these next 2 games, you're done. Let's just be honest. I mean, it's one of those things. You could do it, but you're not going to. You've got to win these 2 games. Then I think you really laid it out. I think for the Chargers to make the playoffs, they may have to beat Baltimore at Baltimore, and that is not an easy task by any means. The real question, if you're a Chargers fan, is can this roster get to the point where they can win these games? Because the roster as is, I think you're an 8-win team. They may squeak a 9th, which is why I said in the poll they might pull a 9th win out of this group. But you've got to get Ryan Matthews back, and something in the secondary has to click, whether that's Verrett being able to come back and play at a regular level, Flowers being able to come back and really lock things down on one side. If you're going to continue to have the injury issues with those 2 guys, to me the defense is just not going to be good enough to get those big wins.
All right, speaking of the poll, last check, 8 and 9, both at 38% right now. Not sure if either of those gets the Chargers in. 7 or less, and 10 are at 12%, and no one has voted that they think the Chargers are going to win 11 or 12 games.
So, wow.
I know.
Really?
I know. Chargers fans not optimistic after a 3-game losing streak. But maybe it's time for another winning streak. It's set up. You've got the Raiders. You got the Rams. Maybe build some momentum going into those last 5 games.
That's what's going to happen. They'll be 7-4 2 weeks from now.
Craig, thanks for coming in again. Good to see you as always. We will come back. Another edition of Bolts Brown Bag next Monday at 12:30. Break down the Raiders game. Look ahead toward the St. Louis Rams right here on 10news.com/Bolts Brown Bag. Have a great week.